They're so cute. Let's give it up one more time for the Youth and Family Ministry. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Then they brought the colt to Jesus and threw their cloaks on it, and he sat on it. Many people spread their cloaks on the road, and others spread leafy branches that they had cut in the fields. Then those who went ahead and those who followed were shouting, "Hosanna! Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the coming kingdom of our ancestor David. Hosanna in the highest heavens." And that's from Mark chapter 11, verse 7 through 10. So yes, the people were shouting Hosanna, praise to the King, but they were looking for a worldly king. And that's not really what Jesus had in mind. That's not what his ministry was about. He, in fact, knew what he was riding into. He knew that the miracles that he was about to perform and the interactions that he would have with the Sadducees and Pharisees would most likely, and in fact did, result in his death. And the human part of him, because we know that Jesus was both human and divine, as we all are, but he fully expressed his Christ consciousness. But we get an inkling in a couple of scripture passages that there was still that bit of humanness that remained, because he said, "And what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour? No, for this purpose I have come to this hour." And again in Gethsemane, he said, "My Father, if it's possible, let this cup pass from me. But nevertheless, not as I will, but thy will." So despite his fear, he rode into Jerusalem anyway. He entered Jerusalem not to fill his human will as Jesus, but his divine purpose as Christ. So the question for each of us today is there something that you are called to do, that you get an inkling of, that this is part of my purpose, part of my reason for being here? And yet, there's fear, there's a block, there's an obstacle that seems to be like a brick wall that's preventing you from doing this thing, taking action. And what I would invite you to envision is maybe it's not a brick wall, maybe it's clouds, maybe it's something gentle that you can just pass through. You know, I struggle sometimes with what I'm going to say and what I'm going to do, and before I get ready for a talk, I'll do some journaling. And sometimes a conversation will emerge out of that. And in this particular instance, I wrote down a question that was presented to me in the journaling. Is a force outside of you causing you distress? And I recognized it's me, distressing me. And so another word for distressing, of course, is fear. And I thought we'd take a little look today at fear and what it is and why it's important that we recognize it, and how can we do something about it. How can we move from that experience of fear into a full expression of love and our divine presence? Well, you might have heard the acronym for fear, false evidence appearing real, and that's based on the letters in the word fear. And in many ways, fear arises out of our lack of information. You know, when we don't know what's going to happen, we get afraid. Oh my gosh, am I going to be able to do this? Am I going to be able to pay my bills? Am I going to be able to get through whatever it is that's before me here? And you know, We are hardwired for fear. There's nothing to be ashamed about it when we do feel fear, because within our bodies we have the sympathetic nervous system. That's the fight or flight. I'm sure you've all heard of that. And the balancing of that is the parasympathetic, and that's the calm and release and relax. And we'll have an opportunity to play with that a little bit later on. And when I was getting ready for the talk, I had imagined Jesus and what he was doing, and I said, feel the fear and do it anyway. I'd completely forgotten that back in the 80s there was a book with that title written by Susan Jeffers, who's a psychologist, and it was quite popular, and it's so popular that there's plaques and everything about that, and maybe not so much about what the content was in her book, but I will say that what she said, one of her truths, is the only way to get rid of the fear of doing something is to go out and do it. And in a way that makes sense. However, what she's talking about is not doing something that's harmful to yourself or harmful to others. What she's talking about is something that comes from a place of love and a place of courage and your higher self and the divinity. The other book that I was reading during this time was written by Ernest Wilson, who's a Unity Classic author and minister and has written many Unity books along his career. And the one that I actually began my Unity journey with Reverend Juan and Raul, way back in the old building. It's called The Week That Changed the World. And it describes this week between Palm Sunday and Easter, and it's a lovely insight into our spiritual journey and Jesus' journey through that time. And what he says is, over and over, we are brought to the realization that it's not just what we know, or more accurately know about, but what we do with what we know that makes us effective, practical Christians. So Jesus modeled that for us in his actions in Jerusalem and throughout his ministry. He took grave risks. He fraternized with the tax collectors and the Samaritan woman at the well, and he performed miracles. He healed people on the Sabbath, which got him into some trouble there, and he raised Lazarus from the dead. He was out there, and so he provides an example for us as well in terms of what he was doing. And he said, maybe the stumbling block isn't so much that we expect God to do something for us, but really what it is that it needs to be done through us. So when I recognize that I'm holding myself back for what I'm called to do, I realize that I have a choice, and we all have that choice, as to how long we stay in that place of, it's me distressing me. Fear comes up. It's normal, but how long do we stay there? And I recognize for myself, and you might have for yourselves as well, recognize that doing the thing actually is a wonderful thing. It makes you feel better. It makes me feel better, and then that was really the right thing to do. It is important to recognize when we are operating in a base of fear. There's hormones in the body that are released, that adrenaline, that fight or flight hormone, that as it persists creates stress, and that depresses our immune system and can lead to any number of diseases. The other thing is that if we're in a state of chronic stress or fear, it's impossible to be happy. They're sort of counteracting or counterbalancing each other. There's love and there's fear. There's happiness and there's anger and anguish. And here's one thing I will say, is that I believe that as each one of us moves through fear and moves more towards expressing our Christ self and that love within us, we not only benefit ourselves, but we benefit everyone around us. And we benefit the world with that divine love and that energy. As we say in unity, we are all one. And I do believe that that's true. Jesus, as our way shower, demonstrated that by our accessing our divine nature, our courage, our wisdom, and our connection to God, we are able to overcome our fear and do what seems impossible to our human mind. So now you may be wondering, okay, so you're talking about fear, I've got it. How do I overcome it? How do I get past that fear? And the first thing I invite you to remember is that you have everything you need within you. And recognizing that fear is present, we can use some things that will allow it to be transformed in our bodies. And so the invitation for you now, if you're willing to just try a little experiment with me. Think of something that brings up fear in you. And I'm not talking so much about think as one should think of it. Generate that emotion, generate that feeling in your body. Feel that. And there's a technique of breathing called 4-7-8. And if you can remember that, you can do this at any time you feel fear and anxiety. So inhale for 4. Let's do that. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold it for 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then slowly exhale for 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. One more time. Inhale for 4. 2, 3, 4. Hold it for 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And exhale slowly for 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Better. Yes. So other things that we can do for ourselves along our spiritual path is always Unity's prayer and meditation practices, and we'll learn a little bit more about that as well. And we've been having this ongoing group of meditations in the park. There's one more left. Reverend Juan will encourage us all to attend that at his house. And we can journal and ask for guidance, and I'll be happy to share that technique that I use with you. Begin with small steps. Do what you like to do best, and do it to the best of your ability. If you don't know where to go or what to do or how to deal with what's going on, you can seek help from our spiritual direction, spiritual counseling, and coaching team. And I can recognize that when fear is present, I can release my distressing thoughts and affirm that guiding presence of divine love in my life. So to recap, we are hardwired with fear as a protective mechanism. We can overcome that by taking empowering actions inspired by love. When we recognize and release the blocks to the awareness of love's presence, we are able to move past fear to fulfill our life's purpose. We do have access to the spiritual tools to guide us along the way. So in conclusion, we are all riding into Jerusalem. We have things that we are called to do. We may be afraid. We may be distressing ourselves. But I would like to share with you the end of that journaling story that I began with. I was sitting there feeling overwhelmed and distressed, and imagined in my mind this wide river, this wide thing that I just couldn't, it was just so big. And I wrote down, Jesus, what you did seems like such a big distance to cross. And I very clearly heard, I will build a bridge for you. I will build a bridge for you. And so I say to each and every one of you here, this message was not only for me, but it was for everyone, each and every one of you. In those times when the gap seems so wide that you can't possibly go over it, remember those words of Jesus. I will build a bridge for you. I will build a bridge for you. And so it is. Amen.